Hello, I am Enid Weichselbaum, a member of the League of Women Voters Rochester. I would like to welcome all of you tonight, the candidates, the audience, and those viewing at a later time to this forum sponsored by the League of Women Voters Rochester. We'd also like to thank our generous partners of tonight's forum, the Rochester Post-Bulletin, the Rochester Area Chamber of Commerce, and the Rochester Public Library for all of your help. Due to the current pandemic, we are limiting attendees to the candidates and necessary volunteers. Guidelines for social distancing and the wearing of masks are also being followed. The League of Women Voters is a volunteer organization organized at the local, state, and national level to encourage citizens to participate in government. While we as a league do study and take stands on issues, we never endorse a candidate or support political parties or candidates. The views expressed in this forum are those of the candidates, not those of the League of Women Voters Rochester or any partner or sponsor of this forum, and the sponsorship of the forum is not an endorsement of any candidate. It is our purpose in sponsoring this forum to provide you with an opportunity to hear candidates discuss face-to-face issues that are important to all of you. Tonight's questions have come from the League of Women Voters Rochester, the Post-Bulletin, the Chamber of Commerce, and members of the public. If you would like to submit questions for a future forum, visit our Facebook page, the League of Women Voters Rochester, Minnesota, for information and for the deadline for submission of questions. There's never enough time to cover all of the issues in a limited time in settings such as this, but please feel free to contact candidates' campaign headquarters directly if your questions are not addressed tonight. We would like to thank all candidates for running for office, for offering to serve your community, and for the enormous time, dedication, and commitment that running and serving demand. We encourage our members as individuals, as we encourage each of you to pay attention, to get involved in your community and political party of your choice. Welcome to tonight's forum, which features the candidates for House District 26B. Tonight's candidates are Randy Brock and Nels Pearson. Each candidate will have 2 minutes to offer an opening statements. The candidates will then respond in turn to questions provided by the League of Women Voters Rochester, this evening's partners, and by the public, which were submitted in advance. Candidates will have 75 seconds each to answer. The candidates will then have 2 minutes each to make closing statements. I'd like to suggest to the candidates that you make your answer as succinct as possible. It isn't necessary to use the entire 75 seconds to finish up your answer. If you if you see the stop time, make sure you finish your sentence, but we won't let you go on beyond that. We'd like to cover as many questions as possible. Each candidate also has 3 30-second rebuttal cards. These can be used at any point after each candidate has answered the question. Only 1 rebuttal card may be used per question. Please put the card in the black basket after you have used it. The timekeeper tonight is League of Women Voters Rochester member Julie Gilkinson. Questions from the public were checked to ensure they follow our guidelines by League of Women Voters Rochester members Maggie Brimajon, Jane Callahan, Deb Duffy-Smet, and Kathy Swessel. Asking questions will be Matt Stoley from the Post-Bulletin and Brent Ackerman from the Chamber of Commerce. The candidates have drawn numbers to determine the order in which they give their opening statements. Nels Pearson drew a number 1, and so he will begin with his opening statement. Exactly opposite?
Vice versa.
All right.
Vice versa. Well, exactly opposite. Randy Brock will go first. Nels Pearson will go second.
All right. Thank you. And thank you all very much for your time and your energy that you put into this, and for all of you for being here today. And thanks to everybody watching as well. I've lived and worked and served in this community for 18 years now. I have a degree in meteorology. I've spent 14 years as chief meteorologist at KTTC. I left that, and currently I'm a full-time real estate agent with Property Brokers of Minnesota. So I felt a sense of urgency as to why I ran. And looking that we are in the midst of a crisis right now, I was used to navigating quick changes and finding solutions to complex situations and helping people stay safe in potentially dangerous situations. And that's something I have experience handling for a start. And I really think it's time for all of us to acknowledge that many of us who live here are facing big challenges, and those are threats to our economic well-being and to our health, and threats to basic human rights and justice that have bubbled to the top as well. So during this time when our strength and our commitment to our neighbors' well-being is really being tested, building a state government that responds to these threats effectively and fairly will be my primary job. Our state government from top to bottom should be one that focuses on providing solutions and opportunities that work for all Minnesotans. State legislators must understand and prioritize the needs of all who live here, rather than simply following orders from party leadership and catering to special interests. That applies to all of us. And the solutions we develop should be based on research and data rather than wishful thinking and the best outcomes for the people who live here. I want to build a Minnesota where all of us have equal opportunities to improve our health, education, economic stability, and quality of life. And how do we get there? $1 million question. I believe it starts by listening to the people who live here and building effective partnerships that produce solutions rather than stalemates and empty promises. And as your state representative, my primary focus will be to get Minnesota government working for all of us who calls this place their home. Thank you.
Thank you, Candidate Brock. Candidate Pearson, your opening statement.
Good evening, and thank you to the League of Women Voters, the Rochester Post-Bulletin, and the Chamber of Commerce for participating in this debate, and obviously your commitment of doing multiple debates over this period of time is admirable and deserves gratitude, so appreciate that. I am State Representative Nels Pearson. I have been serving in the state legislature since 2015 when I was sworn into office after winning election in 2014. So I've been campaigning since 2013 and talking to the people in this district and House district since that time. Learned a lot and certainly have always wanted to express my gratitude for being able to serve you in the Minnesota State Legislature. Just a quick introduction about myself. Before I became the state representative of the area, I am a husband and a father of 4 children. I have a great family, one child who is still in the Democratic Republic of Congo that we're working to bring home. So I also am a realtor in the region. I ended up taking up real estate back in 2009 after a substantial slowdown in the automobile industry. When the cash for clunkers was about to come out, I ended up losing my job in the auto industry and reevaluated what I was going to do moving forward. That inspired me to get into law school. Ended up graduating from law school at the same time that I was beginning my real estate career. So between my wife and I, we work on a lot of projects. We've bought and sold multiple properties in the Rochester area, including commercial buildings in downtown Rochester and downtown Stewartville. Other than our children, those are the pride and joy of our life, and something that we're very proud of. I've been honored to serve in the legislature, and I look forward to serving you in the future if the voters will have me. Thank you.
Thank you, candidates. Our first question comes from the League of Women Voters, Rochester. I'm going to begin with candidate Brock. The question is, what measures would you support to improve and secure elections and voting in Minnesota?
Okay. To improve and secure elections and voting in Minnesota.
Correct.
Extremely challenging question that you have. I think that our Secretary of State has been doing a great job. I know that there's a lot of discussion right now about the efficacy and the safety of mail-in balloting. It tends to be a very partisan discussion. Personally, I have voted in-person absentee, and I was extremely impressed at the process, the safety for myself and my wife when we went in, the distancing that we had there, and then the amount of staffing that was also present to keep the lines moving and not have everybody stuck in a line or stuck in one spot for too long. It was well staffed by election judges. I was really proud to be an Olmsted County resident and go in and vote and see how the whole system was going. And as far as securing things in the future, I don't off the top of my head know an answer to make it more secure if it needed to be. but would be happy to listen to any experts in that realm.
Thank you. Candidate Pearson.
If you could repeat the question.
I can.
Appreciate it, thank you.
What measures would you support to improve and secure elections and voting in Minnesota?
Obviously, we do have a long-standing process, and this year things are certainly going to take a unique spin with a lot more people voting by mail. I'm somewhat concerned actually in what our ability to know the results of an election are and how much time that will take. And in tight elections that we've had in the past in the state of Minnesota, a Senate race comes to mind, a U.S. Senate race comes to mind, where we spent months just trying to figure this out, and a lot of time and resources were put into qualifying or disqualifying various ballots. Now we're going to have postmarks and arrival dates that are going to be coming into discussion, and of course the rules are established, but there will be contention on this. I think another way to secure voting is of course to continue or to change the laws so that we might require driver's licenses. I do think that we want to make sure some type of ID, make sure that people are who they say they are, and that they are in fact a resident of the state of Minnesota, and that they are in fact eligible to vote in Minnesota. So I would be in favor of that and continue to advocate for that. Appreciate the question.
Thank you. Our next question will begin with candidate Pearson. The multiple mass shootings in our country have led to calls for families to be able to report when a person is on the verge of committing violence with a gun. Do you support these so-called red flag laws?
Well, I think, again, red flag laws in general are a great advocacy, but they need to be considered in a response to law enforcement or by law enforcement. It's a challenge because, of course, somebody who is maybe a target could have a red flag concern called in about that individual, and that would make them more vulnerable. So this is something, obviously, that's been before the legislature and been discussed. And I think what's going to really determine whether or not we can move forward with something like that is the actual ability to diagnose and give a person the opportunity to defend their position and their ability to maintain a firearm without causing risk to life of themselves or others.
Thank you. Candidate Brock?
I support it. I do. And I think that there should be some due process after that call is made, but the immediacy to supporting someone's safety and being there for that is key. I am for a gun safety measure of that.
Thank you. Next question will come from the Rochester Post Bulletin. We'll begin with candidate Brock.
Where do you stand on the legalization of marijuana for recreational purposes?
You know, this is a question that when I decided to run for office, I didn't realize how critical this one was to a lot of people. When I think of the issues, when I made that decision, that were 1 through 10, I didn't realize that it was so important to so many people. I am for it from what I have seen in other states and how that's worked. I believe that it needs to come with some pretty heavy safety regulations to make sure that it's done right, to make sure that something like that is not just a flimsy regulation that goes ahead and allows that. This is unfortunately a substance that's out there. It's being used. It was in my small town of 6,500 people when I was growing up. It was something that was fairly easily accessible. And in that realm, it wasn't safe because people didn't know what they were getting necessarily. So as far as that goes, yes, and then bringing with it some regulations that make it also kind of rounding up some of the disparities that are involved with the punishment that goes toward the crimes surrounding simply just marijuana.
Thank you. Candidate Pearson?
Thanks for the question. I actually find it to be the inverse. I do find there are people out there who are very vocal and very strong in their opinion on this issue. But when I'm out door knocking in our district, I have never once in 6 years had somebody actually tell me at the door that that's the most pressing issue in the state of Minnesota. As I study the issue, Mr. Brock has brought up the safety concerns and some of the ability to manage this and to regulate it, and that's kind of typical for what government likes to do in general. What we have seen in other states is by the time you get that regulation and that management of the product and the certification of the growers and all of the infrastructure that's involved in it, the costs end up being substantially higher than what's being done on the black market and in the country right now. Apparently more in Litchfield than in Butterfield, but the main thing there is just the fact that we're still going to have that criminal element that will be exposing people in Minnesota because of that. I'm sorry. I can use a rebuttal if I need to go over my time. But essentially, I do not support the legalization of it at this point. Again, seeing what's going on in other states. Additionally, I have supported the legalization of medical for medicinal purposes.
All right, we'll go with another question from the Rochester Post Bulletin. We're going to begin with candidate Pearson.
I'd like to ask your stance on Medicare for all. So according to a U.S. Census report, 240,000 people, 250,000 people, lacked health insurance in 2018. Yet we hear that government-run health care or universal health care pays a fraction of the dollar compared to private pay to hospitals and clinics. And this is not an abstract issue because Rochester is the home of Mayo Clinic, and many critics argue that the Mayo Clinic would be damaged by such a universal program. Where do you stand on the issue and why?
Well, I stand on the issue where Minnesota was approximately 8 years ago. When I came into office, we were in a good position. We had some measures to protect those that you're referring to on the U.S. Census level to make sure that everyone had access to affordable health care and affordable insurance specifically. So after the Affordable Care Act came into place, it drained the market on a lot of the private sector insurance plans and drove up the costs then because it minimized the number of people who were in the pools. Down here in our area, we were particularly heavy hit because the underwriters have basically looked at the costs of medical care in our region as being higher per person as a census level. Well, part of that is because people move to our area for the health care that they have and they get, so it brings our averages up. So we were disproportionately hit by that. Overall, though, I think our current plans in Minnesota of reinsurance, that has been able to provide a safety net, and I don't support a government-run takeover of our health insurance programs in the country or in the state.
Candidate Brock.
Extremely complex problem. It's going to come with a complex solution. There are people who need health care and need to be able to afford it. How do we make that happen? And is it even possible to have that happen within the realm of still having private insurers and a certain amount, give or take, in this realm, what the government is in charge of and can do? How do we regulate it so that people can still get care, especially coming up? What's going to be a pre-existing condition? Is COVID-19 going to be a pre-existing condition? What are we going to be able to take care of for people who would lose their livelihoods, everything that they've saved, if they had something like cancer, where they had to fight and pay and not be able to go to work? How are they covered? I do believe that we need to find a way. I think that it would be possible with enough energy and putting thought into it, that would be a solution someday. I hope we get there to do Medicare for all. I don't think that our system is ready for it right now. I don't think, from what I've heard from my friends who do work right at Mayo, that it would be very troubling for them. But I think that's something we need to get in and dig deep and figure out.
Thank you. Our next two questions will come from the Chamber of Commerce. We're going to begin with candidate Brock.
All right, I'd like to switch gears a little bit and go talk about local small businesses. As you know, the COVID-19 pandemic has severely impacted local small businesses, including those in our area. What additional measures can and should the state take to help these businesses stabilize their operations and to help them recover?
Sure. And how terrible right now that we don't have a follow-up to the first CARES Act. I feel like that would have been extremely helpful if we had a national response instead of bringing everything down to the state level, where right now 49 out of 50 governors are having to make those changes to how many people are being able to go into certain buildings. At a state level where we have a balanced budget, how complicated is that to be able to provide enough to counter the losses at the business level? It's a tragedy right now, and it's hard to figure out exactly how we do that when we don't have agreement from the top to the state level. And that makes for a very critical issue right there. But being able to take advantage of any and every program that's out there while businesses are being asked to not be open or limit the number of people there by the government, our government needs to be there to help them out. And how do we do that? And again, how difficult it is to find ways to do that when we don't have that national to state agreement and further help to help let us get there.
Thank you, Candidate Pearson.
Thank you, and thanks for the question. Number one, I guess I would point out in Mr. Brock's answer that the federal government is us also. And while we don't have a balanced budget in our Constitution on the federal level, when we spend those dollars, that's debt for our future generations, your kids and mine. And we've got to stop thinking that the federal government is going to provide all the solutions here. I don't have the perfect answer for you, but I will tell you the one thing we should not be doing is doing what it seems to be happening in a lot of situations, which is the heavy hand of state government is coming into some of the businesses that are open, and they're looking for ways to fine these businesses. $7,500 for a fine for a restaurateur having the waitress pull her mask down because a person couldn't hear them while they were taking an order. It's ridiculous. Salon owners are being inspected at a higher rate, and the penalties and fines are exponentially higher than what we've ever seen in the state of Minnesota. These small businesses have been struggling long enough, and for whatever reason, we've seen an administration with this governor that wants to punitively fine these people basically out of business.
Thank you. Another question from the Chamber of Commerce. We're going to begin with Candidate Brock.
This year was a bonding year, and a deal has yet to be reached. What steps would you take as an elected official to promote the successful passage of future bonding measures to ensure that things like local transportation projects, for example, receive the funding that they need?
So in regards to Mr. Pearson's votes on this, I think that I'm disappointed to see how things have worked out between the Senate and between the House and the holdup for the bonding bill and pushing that through and how we would come to agreement and as a pushback against Governor Walz's emergency mandate, thinking that this is a recommendation with this mandate from the White House pandemic response team for the governors because the buck was passed from the national down to the state level, and that we need to be able to respond appropriately. And this is difficult. It's terrible. The pandemic stinks. But not allowing that money to come down locally through the bonding to the cities that need it, Chatfield Arts Center, to the Rochester Airport, over that argument is an example of the stalemates that really make me cringe. And on top of that, there's also some tax relief in there to match section 179 of the federal tax code conformity there that would give a break to farmers and to business people who have to buy machinery and have to buy equipment. And that would be a big boost to them as well.
Thank you, Candidate Pearson.
Well, the question is what I would do to help get that bill passed. And what I've done is, having been on the Capital Investment Committee, I've served and toured all across the state of Minnesota. I've gone to the small towns and communities everywhere and looked at their wastewater facility plants or water treatment facilities, college campuses that have roofs that are leaking, and all kinds of projects that are really must-haves. These are infrastructures that are in very rough shape. The bonding bill is certainly a priority and very important to the state of Minnesota and to my caucus. However, having spent all that time working with the chair of that committee and then to be locked out of the final negotiations, it's easy to say that the only reason we didn't support the bonding bill is because the governor has single-handedly been governing in the state of Minnesota without returning any power to the legislature as our balanced, co-equal branches of government are supposed to operate. But the reality is we have not been able to participate. The majority leaders, actually in both the Senate and the House, had a lot more to do with writing that bill. And unfortunately, we've been locked out of those negotiations. Our minority lead has not even been really able to participate. So I look to finding a way to make that voice heard to pass that bill.
Thank you. Our next question is coming from the public. We're going to begin with with candidate Pearson. The question is, should the state of Minnesota be doing more to protect the water quality in our lakes and rivers?
You know, the state of Minnesota does do a great deal to protect the waters in our lakes and rivers, and I think we've continued to learn more, and as we study the science on exactly how to preserve everything from our silty Lake Zumbro that I lived on for a number of years, and now that's been dredged, and we want to protect that dredging and not have to redo that in 15, 20 years. We'd rather see that last another 100 years. But you know, these are important things. I think sometimes I push back on this because there's a heavy burden of regulations in the state of Minnesota where we are protecting water and keeping water clean. But are we doing our part then to allow businesses to operate here? And what I mean by that is not that we shouldn't protect our waters, but are we making businesses go to other parts of the country or other parts of the world and then doing more damage to our environment? I think in a lot of ways we just need to be smart in Minnesota, and we need to protect our water. We need to do it right. And not over-regulate and overburden, and find solutions to the contamination that is in our lakes, waters, and streams.
Candidate Brock.
Yeah, I think our MPCA and our DNR is doing a great job, especially from what I see locally. I was the president of Hiawatha Trout Unlimited for 5 years, and I was at the state council level, still am right now, as a national chair to National TU. So what I see locally happening is great with what we've done with the Lassard Sam's Outdoor Heritage Fund. We're doing stream restoration projects locally. We're working for some buffer there between the watersheds and the water. And we have a very unique landscape in southeast Minnesota where this is a critical issue, where we have sinkholes, where the water is allowed to go directly from that sinkhole into our aquifers to feed our wells. So because of that, we need to make sure that we are responsibly handling any chemicals that are being applied. And with that said, our farmers are doing an amazing job right now with what they have. Just like any business, there are some who might be encroaching a little bit too far. There shouldn't be a heavy hand there to punish them immediately, but to work with them to do better practices. And there are organizations doing that, like NRCS and the USDA. So I think we're doing a lot. There always can be more when new issues come up. And chemicals that we find may have caused things like a fish kill that happened on the South Branch of the Whitewater just a few years ago.
Thank you. Our next question from the public, we again begin with candidate Pearson. Do you think there needs to be more workforce housing? If so, what do you see as a solution to this problem?
Again, I happen to serve on the housing committee, so this question is right in my alley. What I guess I find a little frustrating with what the Democratic Party had done with the housing committee in a lot of ways was to burden and regulate landlords in a lot of circumstances, adding additional costs really to their circumstances. And you know, as realtors, we know that a landlord, when they have costs, they just simply have to pass those on to the tenant. It either cuts into their profits or it's going to cost or an increase in the rent to the tenant. So in a lot of ways, we've done that with housing. Our building code in the state of Minnesota makes a house 20% more expensive to construct than it might be to construct it across the river in Wisconsin. And we don't hear of like massive casualties of people not being able to live safely in the state of Wisconsin because their houses are so much less safe than what we have in the state of Minnesota. So I think we do need to comb through the building code and reevaluate some of the regulations that we put on the builders, because at the end of the day, we want safe, affordable housing, because a homeless person is not safe.
Thank you. Candidate Brock?
Yeah, we're seeing some good inventive ways to start to go about this with some of the mixed-use facilities where we have a mix of maybe what they would call the luxury rentals and then some more affordable units within the same building. I don't think that we can build our way, even if you strip away every regulation. Once you get to having to purchase the land, to buy all the plywood, to pay for quality labor, and to have the builder put up a home, there might be some costs cut off of all that, but it's still going to be an expensive venture to build brand new to address affordable housing. So when we're talking about affordable workforce housing, we need to talk about some of those homes that have been around for a long time and how do we make them livable for the next family that wants to move in? How do we make more homes available that would encourage someone to find their next home, more affordable, maybe townhome, but it's a very complicated issue. And we certainly don't want to be asking anyone or telling them that it's their time to move. But finding creative ways to address this issue is going to be necessary because I don't think we can build our way to affordable housing.
Thank you. Our next question again comes from the public. I'm going to begin with candidate Brock. The question is, would you be in favor of banning assault weapons?
It's a very broad question right there. I will say first off that I am a gun owner. I owned my first gun at the age of 12. I went through the firearms safety certification at the age of 12 and got it when I was 13. I've been hunting since I was that age, and I currently still hunt, pheasant hunt, turkey hunt, and I deer hunt. Defining assault rifle needs to be an important part of that. Instead of just talking about something that looks like it's dangerous, I think it's fair to talk about what truly is a quote-unquote assault rifle, and I think most importantly, we need to talk about the capabilities of said gun and how many rounds it can hold. Because when we look at things like that, there are, in my opinion, unnecessary amounts of ammunition that can be held in certain weapons, and we do not need automatic weapons or weapons that can be altered to become automatic. We have a crisis of health in our country. Mental health being an issue, which I know that almost becomes a throwaway term when we talk about gun safety, but there's a lot that we need to address when it comes to how we're treating each other and treating weapons in our culture.
Thank you. And candidate Pearson?
I think our current restrictions are effective.
All right. A question from the League of Women Voters. And we're going to begin with candidate Pearson on this one. Has Minnesota done too much, not enough, or the right amount to slow the spread of COVID-19, and why?
That's a very nuanced question. The state of Minnesota is limited to basically, in some ways on a governing level, to the governor, of course. The legislature has been basically taken out of the equation of the decision-making. I think Minnesotans have done more to stop the spread than what some of these restrictions and implications to our businesses have actually done. Minnesotans take this disease very seriously. I've had conversations with people who are maybe less inclined to participate in that, but even they are following the rules and certainly respect and appreciate. Where I think we've made some errors, I think the governor's commissioners should be held under scrutiny for why we released COVID patients into nursing homes. It seems unacceptable, unrealistic, and when I believe over 1,400 now of our deaths, fatalities in the state of Minnesota out of the 1,900 have happened within nursing homes and long-term care facilities. I think we really need to do more to protect those people, the vulnerable people that are living in those facilities.
Thank you. Candidate Brock?
It is a difficult answer right there because Minnesotans have taken it seriously. We have 200,000 dead now in the United States, and the number comparatively in Minnesota is pretty low. The number of cases compared to right now, cases per million in South Dakota is much higher. Iowa has been higher now. We saw with just a blanket reopening what happened in the states of Texas, and then they pulled back the reins again and said, nope, we can't do this. Houston's ICU was filling up. They were having a difficult time there and in Florida. We have done well so far, and with that said, should we do more, should we do less? What's frustrating is where we are all at in our discussion right now, not Mr. Pearson and I, but nationally right now, and how politicized a pandemic has become, and how truly dangerous that is for some people. I don't live in fear. I've been taking my kids to their sports over the course of the summer. We follow the rules. We wear our masks. Unfortunately, mine doesn't fit that well today, but we're doing our best just to live our lives. And when we can all have more of a unified idea of where we're at, when there isn't as much mixed messaging from the top to the bottom, I think that we could handle this much faster nationally than what we've done.
Thank you. Our next question is going to come from the Post Bulletin. I'm going to begin with candidate Pearson.
Climate change, is it real or is it fake? And just a little bit of context here. So DFL lawmakers want to make Minnesota's energy grid carbon-free by 2050. But they have not been able to reach bipartisan consensus yet. Do you agree that more needs to be done to steer power companies toward non-fossil fuel sources? And what specific action would you support? And if you don't believe in it, why?
Well, I think, you can't trust a weatherman, first of all. But besides that, I do think that we've seen the Earth's temperature change. We've seen that happen. Obviously, we were a molten ball of lava at one point. So yeah, the climate changed at that point. And the balance of the Earth, and as we swing through the hemisphere and the galaxies as we pass through, all of the impacts of everything that man is doing on Earth, I think is fairly minimal. However, I think there's nothing wrong with recycling. I think there's nothing wrong with finding renewable sources of energy. I think that that's a responsible thing to do just from the economics of it all. So, I support that. What I don't support is these mandates where they put a date on a calendar, which again could put our state and on a global level, on the industry-wide level, if our costs of producing, the costs of energy are so much higher, that'll increase the costs of all of our goods that we're able to produce in Minnesota and have a negative impact on our economy.
Climate change is real. I think we're working on it maybe at a grassroots level in an okay manner. We're seeing an increase in electrification. More people are driving, say, hybrids or electric cars, and those come with their own costs as well. As technology continues to develop and as we continue to encourage technological development, there will be additional changes that are going to make this much better for us in time. Between now and 2050, that's a lot of time. 3 decades is huge. And at the speed that technology grows exponentially, when you have people like Elon Musk, whose brain is in the exosphere, being able to do things with battery power and the more affordable solar power that we're seeing. There's a DFL Senate candidate over in District 21 who owns a farm. And while he's a 4th generation farmer with cattle there, they're also started up their own solar power business. And we're seeing some of this become more affordable across just the country and the state, and it's a good opportunity for us to dive into that and encourage that technological development.
Thank you. Our next question from the Chamber of Commerce. We will begin with candidate Brock.
The pandemic has led to millions of Americans losing their jobs across the country, including quite a few in our region. What steps can the state take to promote job creation and help put thousands of Minnesotans back to work?
It's a great question. And I'm assuming the question is, once we don't have a pandemic, once we don't have to address that. So there are going to have to be many ways that we did deal with this problem once we got out of the mortgage crisis, once we got into 2010 and 2011 and saw the market rebound. I don't know exactly what the answers are to get everybody back to work. There needs to be some protection of those who are out of work. Right now, none of us, more than likely, are going to go to a concert or to an event or something like that indoors. And right now, we are getting into only indoor season. If somebody wants to go see a show, the people who put that on are no longer working. And we need to be there to assist them as well. And we're going to have to deal with much more nuanced and complex issues once we are past this. And I'm hoping it's sooner than later. The response can be quick. And I'm hoping that a vaccine works and that's able to be unrolled fairly quickly, and that its efficacy is something that gets us back to what we would call normal sooner than later.
Thank you. Candidate Pearson.
Could you repeat the question?
Sure. The pandemic has led to millions of Americans losing their jobs across the country, and of course that includes many here in our region. What steps can the state take to promote job creation and help put thousands of Minnesotans back to work?
I think number one, we obviously need to try to find more ways to open up safely. More businesses need to be allowed to open up safely. We're still kind of cranking down and holding commerce back in those regards. We need to provide basically the manner in which the best practices to participate in various things, like going out to a restaurant or going to a store, and providing the security and the assurance for the individuals as they go into these elements. I think, again, the state of Minnesota, Minnesotans have been revolutionary in their ability to work from home. We've, of course, recently heard the announcement from the largest private employer in the state of Minnesota that said that basically all these folks that are working from home, they're going to maintain that long beyond the pandemic at this point, because they've found the efficiency levels have actually gone up. So there's some good news and some great opportunities, I think, that come out of this. So we need to become more flexible and figure out ways actually for the state to adapt and adjust to that as well. We need to find solutions and be able to provide that type of latitude for our counties and cities to provide services in that fashion.
Thank you. Next question comes from the public, and we will begin with candidate Pearson. Will you vote to fully fund K-12 public education?
That's a kind of again, a nuanced question. If you're talking about the mandates that the state puts on the schools, I think that is maybe where the question asker is going with that. Of course, I feel that either the state needs to relieve burdens that we put on school districts, or we need to provide the funding for it. The reason that's a little nuanced is because, again, some of those dollars come on the federal level, and some of those dollars come from the local school districts. So usually it's those state mandates that we're talking about. And I believe that absolutely we either need to do one or the other.
Thank you. Candidate Brock?
I'm pretty amazed at what our teachers in our schools are able to do right now, how much work and effort the teachers are having to put into their jobs every day. And right now they're becoming, in some ways, they're IT experts now in order to teach remotely. And they're, in a way, public health experts when kids show up to elementary school. They are, in a way, therapists dealing with kids who are struggling. They have so many things on their plate because of just simply their product, their kids, their students who are showing up, and the incredibly important job that our educators have and the help that they need. As we face a budget crisis coming up soon, $2.5 billion, it's really hard for me to say that I will fully fund our public schools. I will do everything in my power to do that as I am capable. We are also going to be facing some monetary issues that we haven't seen or dealt with in a long time.
Thank you. Our next question comes from the League of Women Voters. We're going to begin with candidate Brock. How do you work with others whose values do not align with yours?
We all have families, right? We all have families with very differing opinions. And we've always got that family member who is extremely different in their viewpoints than us. I have learned and done my best to not anger. I feel like right now, and really one of the strongest points of why I'm running is when I look at the landscape, I see a lot of really angry people. And I see our dialogue is failing. First, sitting and listen. Why can't we sit and listen to people we don't agree with? And we cannot agree with somebody vehemently. But the tools I bring to the table right there are just to sit and listen. We do that in our transactions. Somebody might not have a reasonable request in what they want. Sometimes it's the person we represent. Sometimes it's the other party. Sometimes they're extremely emotional about it. Sitting and listening, figuring out what is going to solve the problem is first and foremost my goal. And that's what I hope to bring to office.
Thank you. Candidate Pearson?
Very good answer. Actually, I would echo that in a lot of ways. I think the number one thing is to be in your district and present and listen to the voices within your district. I take pride in the fact that I've never turned away somebody who has invited me out for coffee just to have dialogue on an issue that I may completely disagree with them. Never once have I turned anyone away when they've come up to St. Paul and asked for a meeting. I've attended city council and township meetings in my district. This district covers 14 of the 18 townships of Olmsted County. Every year I go to a meeting at least once in each of those townships, in each city hall, and in addition, now I've added the Olmsted County Commissioners meeting. So last night I just finished my 20th meeting of the year. Being able to sit down and talk to the people that you represent gives you credibility when you go to St. Paul and you're sitting in committee and you're expressing the views and the outlook of the people that you know are there. And when you do that, then you know they have your back because they know you're standing up for them. And I think that's the listening element of it is a great step.
Thank you. Our next question will be from the Post Bulletin. We'll begin with candidate Brock.
Minnesota continues to see persistent achievement gap between white and minority students in terms both of performance and graduation rates. Earlier this year, retired Minnesota Supreme Court Justice and Federal Reserve Bank President proposed a constitutional amendment to guarantee all children the right to a quality education. What would you propose and support to address the gap? And what other ideas would you to improve education for students overall?
Was this to me first? Yes. Okay. So we've got a tremendous amount of information at our fingertips, right in front of our eyes, that shows these disparities in so many different ways in education and in criminal justice and in affordable housing and just the opportunities that differ for us based on how we look and our color. And it's very unfortunate to see that, but it's also, it gives us an ability to recognize the problem that's out there and give us a place to start, to figure out these problems. There is no magic wand that we can wave over the system to make it entirely better, but having that information and that data is key for starters. And then to talk with the communities and the schools and the educators and to hear from so many people who live this experience to see what's missing and to hear what we need to do. And then also to have legislators who are up there working actively. I don't even know their names. I don't know what side of the aisle they're on, but they've already introduced some legislation, some bills to get these issues worked on. None of them are going to answer the question or fix it, but it's going to be a step forward. We need to keep taking steps forward. It might take us our lifetime to get there, and we leave it up to generations behind us, but we need to keep moving forward to fix these disparities.
Thank you, and candidate Pearson.
Yeah, I believe it's the Page-Kashkari amendment that you're talking about. And you know, I think the number one thing that specific amendment brought forward was a good discussion and dialogue of how much we are failing, how far behind we are. We do need to do a lot of the things that Mr. Brock is talking about. I think, you know, specifically I authored a bill at one point to bring more minority teachers into the classroom. That's something that you know, again, having people that can identify and have those relational and someone to look up to within the schools and the classrooms is important. I think we need to open up and be broader in our ideas of who can provide these resources, especially post-COVID now. Everybody and their brother knows how to use the Zoom meetings, right? And how hard would it be to allow more tutelage, more tutorials for maybe retired teachers that can reach into neighborhoods that historically we wouldn't want that just because of the licensing and the protocols of people interacting. We need to reinvent that and provide services. Locally here, I'm a big supporter of the Project Legacy organization. I think that has done wonders to advantage children who traditionally wouldn't have access to resources to finish their high school education and go on to their college education. I think that was finishing my sentence. I'm sorry.
Thank you, and we have a rebuttal.
Yeah, and just to keep the conversation going, to be honest, we have programs that are fantastic that are handling this, and I would be remiss to mention that one of those, just dealing with these benchmarks, is Cradle to Career. Full disclosure, my wife is the executive director, and they're working on hitting goals over time, because when you have third graders who are not hitting reading goals, that measurement is used to measure the school to prison pipeline, to see where we're falling short. So there are a lot of different ways that we can go about doing this, and one of those is just recognizing that it's there and embracing these programs that are working on it.
Thank you. We'll go on to the Chamber of Commerce. We'll begin with candidate Pearson.
Minnesota has yet to conform to the federal tax code, which creates an undue burden on local citizens and businesses. What steps will you take to help streamline our state tax system and ensure that it conforms with the federal code, including Section 179?
Well, again, last night I was at the Farm Bureau annual meeting in Eota, Minnesota, and that's the number one topic for farmers. They buy a lot of equipment, and the inconsistency in the federal to state code means that they're writing checks sometimes to the Department of Revenue for thousands, tens of thousands of dollars sometimes, and it's kind of unexpected and really unfortunate. I had my very first treasurer when I was running for the state house, ended up moving down to Texas. Well, he's a tax prep guy. He knows the numbers. He knows the math. And the fact that we tax Social Security in this state is an absolute tragedy. And I think we're down to like 12 states now that still tax Social Security. And it's really unfortunate that so many great Minnesotans with knowledge and money and resources, we push them out of the state of Minnesota in their retirement years because we're taxing their Social Security. So those would be two very important components of what I would seek changes of.
Thank you. And candidate Brock?
I hope to see Mr. Pearson push this through in the bonding bill that did include that tax conformity. That's it.
That's it?
Here, I got one for you then.
Okay, and then we have a rebuttal.
Well, I would point out that it is just poor form to put tax provisions in a bonding bill. Historically, it's not been done. And unfortunately, the Democratic Party, when they've written this, has basically used that as leverage so that we have to pass both at the same time. These tax provisions are so important that, like you said earlier, we shouldn't be holding these things hostage. They're very important. Section 179 is very important. And again, our state constitution talks about a single item in legislature, and our bills are supposed to be on the same topic. And having tax provisions in a bonding bill certainly doesn't fit that form.
And we have a rebuttal.
Yeah, and I will just add that Representative Pearson understands the ins and outs and the nuances of that much better than I do. What I would hope to see is that that's accomplished. And from what I understand, and I may be mistaken here, is that it was an agreement that came up between the House and the Senate, a compromise that put that tax conformity in the bonding bill.
Okay. I was going to do one more question, but we have only time for closing statements. And by luck of the draw, candidate Pearson is going to go first with his closing statement. You have 2 minutes.
Thank you very much. And again, I want to thank the League of Women Voters, the Rochester Post-Bulletin, and the Rochester Chamber of Commerce for participating, obviously the library for participating, all the volunteers and staff that helped make this happen. And I want to thank the voters for watching. It's obviously there are very few opportunities, especially this cycle. We have had parades canceled, the county fair was canceled. The ability to get out and meet and talk to somebody that's running for office in your area has been limited. And for that, this opportunity is certainly one that we greatly appreciate, and hope you've learned a lot about the positions that Mr. Brock and I take as we would serve you in the legislature. I just want to, again, express my gratitude for being able to serve you, and again, put that opportunity out there that if somebody feels like there's an issue that I haven't covered, you have specific questions, we can social distance or have coffee outside or do a meeting or a phone call. I'm happy to do that. I've really never turned anyone down when they've actually had that request. My email address is, my website's nels.com. So to keep it simple, my email address is simply nels@nels.com. So if you can remember that, you can remember how to get a hold of your state representative. I've always tried to be accessible and easy to get a hold of. And again, it's been an honor to serve the citizens of House District 26B. Thank you.
Thank you. It's a lot easier than mine. And candidate Brock.
Thank you, and thank you to the League of Women Voters for holding this Post-Bulletin and the Chamber of Commerce. This is a great example of grassroots democracy in action right here. Thank you, Representative Pearson, for doing this as well, and just having the opportunity to get together and discuss our differing ideas and to have disagreement. And with that said, I've got a whole lot of stuff written down here, and I'm going to skip it. I'm thankful for the opportunity to have done this. You know, we're having conversations with voters. I'm making phone calls every day. We're trying in this age of COVID to reach out as much as we can. So far, we have avoided going from door to door in the campaign. It's been an honor to have discussions with people who do choose to pick up their phone, who do choose to show up at an event where we can social distance outside. In the coming days, it's going to be even more and more difficult as it gets colder, and we're going to be struggling to find some nice weather to get out and to campaign. And this has been such an amazing learning experience for me to get out there and take part in something that's absolutely brand new. With that said, it's easy to get dismayed sometimes doing this when you get hung up on right away, or someone gives you their opinion very loudly and then hangs up on you, or dealing with the things that we address in social media. And that's really exactly just where we are all at in our culture today. And just like Mr. Pearson said, I'm open to having a respectful conversation with people, and I'm even open to be getting yelled at a little bit, but at some point our ears turn off a touch when it gets to be seemingly very disagreeable. But that's our job as well, to take in and to talk with you and to figure out how we can get to a better place and to listen to the struggles that everybody has. So we're going to get there, and I'm hopeful for it, and I'm thankful for this opportunity.
Thank you, candidates. I would like to thank each of the candidates for your willingness to participate in tonight's forum. Thank you for your service to the community and for your willingness to participate in the Democratic Party by running and serving. I would like to remind you that the views expressed in the forum tonight were those of the candidates, not those of the League of Women Voters Rochester or any partner or sponsor of this forum. Thanks to our partners, the Rochester Post-Bulletin, the Rochester Area Chamber of Commerce, and the Rochester Public Library. Remember that Election Day is November 3rd and that early voting has begun. If you have voted by absentee ballot and would like to change your ballot based on what you learned tonight, visit mnvotes.org for more information on that process. Remember to vote. If you have a question about your polling place, or would you like to see example of your, a sample of your ballot, visit vote411.org, which is the League of Women Voters website, vote411.org. You also can learn more about the candidates on that website. To see this forum again, access the forums from the Rochester Public Library website. Good night, everybody, and thank you, everybody.